Back in 1776, no sooner had Benjamin Franklin signed the Declaration of Independence, and then he was off secretly to France, and what we know, and it seemed to a lot of people, to be an impossible mission, and his mission was to secure loans and arms from King Louis XVI. Now, why would France, only a dozen years after its complete thrashing by the British in the Seven Years' War, and the loss of all North American colonies in defiance of the Treaty of Paris and international law, risk helping revolutionaries? Was it to exact revenge for the humiliating defeat, or was it to rekindle an ancient rivalry between two royal families? And how, whether or not they succeeded, could the Americans ever repay any loans? And the embryonic United States had no money, and no banks, and no credit. Now, Benjamin Franklin, after decades of living in England as a colonial and as a noted man of science and inveterate traveler, knew Europe really well. He knew its culture, its customs, and its habits probably better than any other American. He was undoubtedly well aware of the highly popular fad of using costly, cured, scented, and finely pulverized tobacco that's also known as snuff. Now, tobacco had first entered Europe at the end of the 16th century when Christopher Columbus's return to Spain. Um, when Christopher Columbus's return to Spain from his second voyage of discovery, his crews had observed the native Caribbean smoking it. The Portuguese similarly brought the weed home from their base in Brazil. In 1611, John Rolfe, who was Pocahontas' husband, introduced a sweet tobacco from the Caribbean to Virginia, and planters soon grew nothing else, sending off their crops to England to be dried and crushed to a fine powder called snuff. Now, the costly new commodity became a hallmark for the elite. Now, commoners couldn't afford it, but they smoked their tobacco in pipes, and snuff inhalers were rewarded with the powerful charge of nicotine. Now, snuff became a court favorite for men and women. Back in England, at that time, Queen Charlotte, who was the wife of King George III and mother of 14, kept a well-stocked room full of her favorite varieties under lock and key in Windsor Castle. In France's elegant court at Versailles, Queen Marie Antoinette demurely took a pinch of snuff between the tip of her thumb and their index finger and inhaled it, consider, considerately sneezing it into a scented handkerchief. Aristocratic diplomats and businessmen competed by exchanging what we call elaborately decorated snuff boxes. Now, it was often of painted porcelain, sometimes of gold. Now, preferring the use of silver spoons to dip a bit of the powder, they kept their hands pretty much clean. Now, gentlemen carried small, snap-top cases of snuff in their vest pockets. Now, in Amsterdam, Dutch devotees had preferred to assemble in fashionable snuff houses. Now, France, having no tobacco-growing colonies, had to pay a premium to England to import the fine flavored powder. The English forbade their colonies to sell tobacco outside the British Empire, but extracting a fortune from the red soil of the Chesapeake colonies, colonists grew rich from the backbreaking labor of ever-growing numbers of enslaved Africans. Now shipping half-ton barrels of leaves to London for processing. Now Franklin and his colleagues on the Continental Congress's secret committee on trade had knew of France's snuff dependency on England. A full year before declaring American independence, Congress, in defiance of British law, declared their ports open for foreign trade. Now, um, French diplomats had been watching the growing American resistance movement. Now, on a secret mission, the French foreign minister sent the playwright um, Beaumarchais to London with £1 million of a gift from the king. The Congress responded by dispatching more secret envoys to basically join Franklin in Paris. They took up rent-free residence in the suburban palace of the foreign minister's brother-in-law's house and set about arranging cargoes of munitions that were to be sent to French ports in the Caribbean for transshipment to American forces. Now, by the end of 1776, French arms dealers were meeting with George Washington at his headquarters to take orders for weapons, tents, and uniforms. American financiers had funded construction and rounded up crews for hundreds of heavily armed merchant ships to transport cargoes of crops to the French and capture British prizes. By the summer of 1777, shiploads of French cannons had arrived in America just in time to defeat a British army at the pivotal Battle of Saratoga, and they were convinced that the Americans could succeed. Louis um, the 16th had signed a treaty of trade and military alliance with Benjamin Franklin and his fellow emissaries. Whenever an American diplomat came home, he went to Versailles to say adieu, and received the gift of a snuff box adorned with the flattering portrait of the king and a sprinkling of jewels. Now, Benjamin Franklin was the king's favorite. He gave the foreign minister special instructions, and Franklin received a gilded snuff box, the royal effigy, surrounded by 401 diamonds. The final battle of the American Revolution was a double victory for the French. Their cannon and their fleet had boxed in the British at Yorktown. Not only had they helped their American compatriots win independence, but France had secured the monopoly on American tobacco, and no longer would they depend on England for every sniff and sneeze. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening. And also, if you want to support my work even further, I have a Patreon link on my About section for YouTube where you could donate to help further support the channel, and I hope you guys enjoyed.